Thank you for listening to the Distinguished Physical Education Podcast, where we discuss best practices in PE and share expert insights from thought leaders in the PE community. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to take a minute to share an awesome professional development opportunity coming up this summer. The Colorado Health and Physical Education Council is hosting its PE Summit on June 4th and 5th at Jefferson High School in Edgewater, Colorado, just a few miles west of Denver. This event brings together PE teachers, district coordinators, and passionate educators from across the state and country to exchange ideas and walk away with practical strategies that can make an immediate impact on your teaching. I had the privilege of co-presenting last year with a colleague, and we're excited to be back again this year. One of the things I love most about this summit is its focus on high-quality instructional strategies. If you're looking for ways to refine your teaching and connect with other educators who are just as passionate about PE as you are, this is the place to be. It's also completely free. So mark your calendar for June 4th and 5th, and be sure to register using the link in the episode description. We hope to see you there. My guest today is Kristen Santos, a dedicated physical education teacher in Massachusetts since 1998. She started her career in Framingham and has spent the last 20 years teaching PE at Hopkinton Middle School. Kristen is also a certified yoga instructor with over 200 hours of training, a registered children's yoga teacher, and a Yoga Alliance continuing education provider. Beyond the classroom, Kristen is a yoga teacher-trainer for the Child Light Education Company, where she leads courses like Yoga and Mindfulness for Athletes and Yoga for PE Teachers. In 2024, she was recognized as the Massachusetts Middle School PE Teacher of the Year. She also travels the country presenting at conferences and providing professional development for school districts, helping educators integrate yoga into their PE programs. In this episode, we discuss what sparked Kristen's passion for yoga, the benefits of incorporating yoga into physical education, strategies for aligning it with standards-based instruction, how yoga can help create a more positive and inclusive PE environment, and other topics. Before we jump into today's conversation, I want to take a moment to highlight Kristen's incredible work. She's written 2 fantastic yoga curriculum books designed specifically for elementary and middle school PE teachers, titled The Yoga Curriculum for Physical Education, a comprehensive guide to implementing yoga. Some of the things I really appreciate about these 2 books are how each lesson is aligned to standards, offers effective differentiation strategies and assessments, and they include high-quality illustrations. As with any curriculum, you might find some modifications are needed, especially if you're following the CLO structure that I outline in my book. Overall, this is a fantastic resource for anyone looking to incorporate yoga into their PE program in a meaningful way. And Kristen has been kind enough to provide a discount code just for DPE podcast listeners. Just go to www.yogainphysed.com and enter the code DPE25 for 25% off of her K5 and 6-8 yoga curriculum books. The website and code will also be in the description for this episode. And now I bring you Kristen Santos. Kristen, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Gary.
I'm really excited about today's conversation because I know how valuable yoga can be in physical education. So let's start right at the beginning. What inspired you to start incorporating yoga into your PE classes?
Well, Gary, that's a great question. I've been teaching PE for 27 years. And it wasn't until 2016 when I was diagnosed with breast cancer. I didn't handle this news well, and my oncologist asked me, have you ever tried yoga? And to be honest, I thought this is a really annoying question, and the answer was no. So after I went through all of my surgeries, I needed to heal mentally and physically. So I started practicing some yoga just online, just trying to be a self-learner. And the breathing is what really, really helped me. So after doing some research, I found Child Light Yoga. It's actually now called Child Light Education. The co-owners are Sally Dalal and Megan Morris. They took it over a couple of years ago. They offered classes for teachers. So I took my first yoga teacher training, and it was called Yoga and Mindfulness for Children. And I was hooked, and I kept saying, oh my God, this is awesome. Like, we have to get this into the PE curriculum. So in less than 2 years, I became an RCYT, which is a registered children's yoga teacher. So whenever I find something good, I want to bring it not only to my own children, but to my students. So I slowly started weaving this into the curriculum. And one year I used yoga as my professional practice goal. So I went to each school in the district and taught a lesson with their PE teachers. I started a yoga club after school. I hosted a yoga and mindfulness night for the community in January of 2020. So things were going great. And then COVID hit and the world just shut down. So the silver lining for me was that summer, Child-Led Education offered a 200-hour training via Zoom. So I'm stuck at home with my husband and the kids. And it was perfect. So it was something that I always wanted to do, but I just didn't have the time to get away from my family and teaching full time. I was so lucky to spend this training with Megan and Sally. And it was a 6-week training. And I don't know how I would have survived that time had I not. Just it changed me forever. So then going back to school in September of 2020 was one of the most challenging things I'd ever experienced as a teacher. And any teacher listening knows that when you go back after the world shut down, it was just everything changed. In Massachusetts, our students needed to be 6 feet apart at all times. We had a hybrid model, so we'd see half the school on one day and the other half on the other day. We couldn't play catch, so we basically couldn't use any equipment. Needless to say, I started doing a lot of yoga. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to just get this all out of my head and put it on paper. And so I wrote a curriculum K-5. And then a few years later, I wrote the middle school one. And my sister, who's an art teacher actually out in Denver, where you're from, she did the illustrations. She's very talented. And to my knowledge, there is no other curriculum for PE teachers to teach yoga like this one. So we're quite proud of it. And we love it because it's by teachers for teachers. A lot of these activities are things that I've tried with sports teams or my children's friends and the yoga club. And I also taught at the club across the street. So it was a combination of all these things that I had been doing. And I just put it into a book with assessments, and the whole scope and sequence is there for PE teachers to get them started.
Yeah, it's an incredible resource. I have the middle school one right here in front of me, and I shared the K-5 curriculum book with my instructional curriculum specialist here in Denver.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, we're looking forward to digging into it and sharing it with the teachers that we support. What an incredible journey. I appreciate you sharing that with us. It sounds like yoga started as a deeply personal practice for you, and I just love how you took that initial curiosity and turned it into a district-wide effort, and then eventually this incredible resource, this curriculum for PE teachers.
I had no idea what yoga really was until I started to practice it myself. Another thing I did with teachers recently at our school was breath work, and I shared the breath from my books. And I was talking to a teacher friend of mine, and she said, Kristen, I really used those breaths the other day. I was exhaling longer than my inhale, and it just really helps me. So thank you for sharing it. So I think anybody that's really into yoga just wants to share it with everybody and spread it because it's just so good.
Many PE teachers still lean heavily on traditional team sports. Why do you think it's important to introduce students to non-competitive and lifetime activities like yoga? And then follow-up question is, how does incorporating yoga impact student engagement or confidence or even their mindset?
Great question. So team sports are obviously great in PE class. If taught and presented correctly, they can have a lot of value. However, we should be encouraging our students to do lifelong physical activities too. Those of us who were athletes back in the day know that the likelihood of us playing that sport forever is very slim. So yoga is great for many reasons. It not only strengthens and lengthens the muscles, but it helps to focus the mind and balance the central nervous system. One of the reasons why I like teaching yoga is because all students can do it. It doesn't have to be perfect, and that's why we call it a practice. It's non-competitive. We need to remember that only a small percentage of our students are athletes and truly enjoy competition. Competition can really be intimidating for some. So yoga is great because it can be modified at all levels. Students not only feel great after practicing yoga, but their confidence is high too. I can't tell you how many students I've had come up to me after class and say, this was really fun. Can we do it again? And a lot of them are really happy that we're doing something other than a team sport. And the athletes will say too, like, wow, this feels really good. I can remember a student that I had years ago. She hated PE. She did everything in her power to get out of PE. And we all know those students. And when we did yoga, she was like the first one there. She was so attentive. So I sent home a positive email to her mother. And her mother wrote back just saying how much she loves doing yoga. And she would actually look forward to PE days. And she knew her daughter. She knew that she would do anything to get out of going to school, try to get out of going to PE. Not every kid likes the same activity. And she was a quiet kid. And I kind of had the sense that she didn't love the team sports, and I knew she loved the yoga. So let's be mindful of all the different types of kids that we have. And it's also important to introduce them to something that they might do outside of school and for the rest of their lives. I always say you can do it at your age, you can do it at my age, you could do it at your grandparents' ages. So find something to do that's going to keep you physically active for your entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. Some really great reminders in there. You mentioned that obviously the goal is to try to find lifelong activities for students. And then the other thing that I took away from that too is when you are planning, not just your daily lessons and how you differentiate different activities, but when you plan the content that you actually want to teach students, you want to make sure that you're planning not just for your average student who might enjoy team sports. So I think those are really great reminders that PE is about helping all students find ways to move and enjoy movement that they can continue on for the rest of their lives. I think some teachers feel a little nervous or anxious when thinking about incorporating yoga into their PE curriculum or scope and sequence, and they face some challenges. So I think it could be powerful for you to share some challenges that you have faced when you were starting to integrate yoga into your curriculum and how you overcame them.
Anytime you try something new, you're going to make mistakes. And I've been fortunate because I haven't had a lot of resistance to teaching yoga. I think the adults and the administration are more aware of its benefits and would actually like to see more yoga in schools and more yoga in physical education. So a few years ago, I was asked to go to a training and I needed to show how yoga could align to the standards. And it was actually a lot easier to do than I thought. At the time, our district was using the old Shape America standards for 2013. So much of what the standards are asking us to accomplish can be met by practicing yoga. And the same holds true for the new standards in 2024. But one of the biggest challenges that I had in teaching yoga was the fact that many kids didn't know what yoga was. So that's why I wanted to get it into the K-5 curriculum, so that they would have a sense that it does feel good in our bodies, that anybody can do it, that I can be successful. It's always interesting when you ask the kids, what does yoga mean? The different types of answers that you get. And a lot of them think that it's just for middle-aged women who like to wear expensive leggings. So as PE teachers, we need to get our students to buy into the activities. We need to make yoga fun for them, especially the younger kids. So children's yoga is active and engaging, and it has to be, especially for the younger ones. So if we start to normalize it in PE class, then they'll be comfortable with it by the time they get into middle and high school. I didn't even know there was children's yoga until I took my first training in 2017. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people know about, and that's why sometimes they just try to introduce it to high schoolers. Like, oh, why don't you just go try yoga and just put on a video or, live stream something. But teach them when they're younger. So then by the time they get to middle school and high school, they're comfortable with it and they know how great it feels.
Yeah, one of the things that I noticed in your curriculum when I was reading through it was how you incorporate yoga balances and poses with physical activity. There are mat sequences that you do with students. Also, a lot of the activities that you do with students are embedded in movement. Is that something you could speak a little bit about?
One of my favorite activities that's a first grade lesson is red light, green light. When you freeze, you go into chair pose. And then the next time you hold a balancing pose, you freeze and you go into tree pose. So you're working on balance. So they're learning the poses through play, through game, through physical activity. And then in my book, I have a written mat sequence that the teacher could just get up there and read if they're not comfortable practicing yoga or maybe feel self-conscious about doing it in front of their students. And then the students just follow along. So it makes it less intimidating and makes it fun for the kids. Another thing that we often do is we'll make breathing fun. So snake breath versus buzzing breath. So I'll ask half the gym to do buzzing breath and the other half to do snake breath and see who can do it louder. It's a simple inhale through the nose, and then you exhale with a Z or an S. And the goal is to get kids to exhale longer than their inhale. because that's what activates the parasympathetic nervous system. That's designed to calm and relax you. So don't just tell kids to breathe. Don't just tell kids to calm down or will you focus? We need to give them the skills and the tools on how to do these things.
I think that one of the challenges that a lot of teachers face is that they think that yoga is just going to be exclusively having students on a mat and that they need to be an expert at various
Right.
yoga poses and balances. So I really love the way that you incorporated those yoga balances and poses into movement. I think that will make a lot of teachers feel more comfortable in incorporating it into their curriculum. You also mentioned that there might be some districts or schools that are somewhat resistant to having yoga incorporated into their PE classes. What might you say to teachers who are hearing from their principal or from parents, someone who makes decisions, that they don't want yoga to be a part of their PE curriculum?
So that's another reason why I wrote this curriculum. People are always afraid of what they don't know. Think of any ism. It's because we don't understand it. We don't know it, from racism to sexism to anything. As I said earlier, a lot of people don't know what yoga is. So if you buy my curriculum, if you have the book and you have a parent saying, oh, I don't want my child practicing yoga, show them, hey, it's red light, green light, and you freeze and go into chair pose. So in my books, I don't use the Sanskrit terms. And I don't even say namaste. I never say prayer position. I say hands to heart. So it's totally written for the public school teacher to use. And then, once a parent sees that book, they say, oh yeah, my kid can do that. Like, oh, I don't have a problem with that. Oh, this is actually pretty good. And I have had teachers ask me about that. And they have told me, I love having this book because here it is. This is what we're doing. So it's a concrete curriculum. And I don't think any parent would object to it. And in fact, I know a lot of PE teachers do appreciate that they have this in their hands so that they can show their community and their parents what we are doing. And I totally understand, as a parent myself, I want to know what my children are being taught in public schools.
You've created such a great resource that, like you said, I envisioned it being used in a very similar way, where if there is any pushback from parents or building leaders, that teachers could just sit down with the curriculum and walk them through exactly what they're going to be teaching students. And I'm pretty sure that people would see that there's only benefits to come from the lessons that you created in this curriculum.
It's good for you, trust me.
Yeah. And along those terms, one of your passions is creating a positive and inclusive PE culture for your students. So I think that that's something else that can be highlighted when trying to advocate for the reasons why yoga is important in PE class. What strategies have worked best for you in making all students feel safe and welcome in your gym? And how has yoga influenced that?
Yes, great question. Students need to feel safe in the gym. And when we're teaching, especially in PE, we need to choose our words carefully. We need to avoid the triggers. This holds true for when we're teaching yoga. So for example, and this is written in the mat sequences in my book, if I were in front of your class teaching a yoga sequence, these are my words. This is what I would say to your students. So instead of saying bend over, I would say hinge at the waist. So we have to think about our language, and I don't mean to be crass. I never ask a student to shut their eyes. You can lower your gaze, and if you wish, you can close your eyes, because then, again, that might trigger somebody. Another thing, too, is anytime I teach a yoga sequence, and this holds true for when I'm working with athletic teams, I'll put them in a circle, or I put the mats on the 3-point line. So then I stand underneath the basketball hoop. This way they can all hear me and they can all see me. And I don't allow any double parking. I never want to put another student behind another student. So if you're in a vulnerable position, no one's behind you. The other thing I am always aware of is if they're lying on their mats, their heads are towards me and their feet are away, so that they can feel safe in their bodies and feel comfortable in class. Secondly, I let my students know that I'm human too. I have battled anxiety all my life, and I didn't really realize it until I was diagnosed with breast cancer and until I started practicing yoga. And then I realized that, wow, this breathing really does feel good. I'm human too. And when people think of the word yoga, I think they think of, just the poses, but the breathing is so much of it. So another thing that people don't know, and this is a fun one to let your students know, is yoga actually means to unite. It comes from the Sanskrit term Yuj, Y-U-J, which means to unite. So when we practice yoga, we are uniting our brain, our body, and our breath. And sometimes when I talk about the breathing, I'll say to my students, what happens when you cry? What happens when you cry really hard? And then they'll tell me, oh, I cried so hard, I couldn't breathe. Yeah, you know why? Because your brain, your body, and your breath is all connected. So eventually, what made you stop crying? Well, I just worked on my breathing and finally caught my breath. So that's when we say exhaling longer than your inhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system. It's the opposite of fight or flight and is designed to calm and relax our bodies. Equal breaths help to balance the central nervous system, and inhaling greater than your exhale energizes and wakes the body up. Students are always amazed when they learn about this. I have a good friend named Ann Bees. She's also a yoga teacher trainer for Childlight. And her famous quote is, we teach kids how to read and write. Why aren't we teaching them how to breathe properly? Just as reading and writing is a life skill, so is breathing properly. Now think about this. Imagine if every student knew how to breathe properly to self-regulate. What a beautiful, beautiful thing that would be. Sometimes kids get into arguments in PE, right? If they're playing or they get competitive, and they'll come running over to me when we're out on the rugby field and they'll say, Mrs. Santos, he did this and she did that. And they're all like the emotions. They're like excited, they're angry, they're frustrated, and they all just start yelling. And I'm like, time out, pick a breath, buzzing breath or snake breath. And they know I got to inhale through my nose and then exhale through my mouth. And my exhale needs to be longer. And then after they do that, I say, okay, are you calm yet? And if they're not, I make them do it again. And then once they're calm, okay, so now what happened? And they're learning that you can't talk, you can't communicate, you can't make decisions until your body is calm. So I'm giving them a strategy to self-regulate. And it's real life. It's not just having your teacher breathe because you're in a PE class and you want to get a good grade in there. It's a life skill that they can take with them forever.
Those are really powerful strategies and skills that you're teaching students that transfer into other contexts. So when a building leader or a classroom teacher or someone who's supervising recess sees a student choose one of the strategies on their own that you taught them, there's no better advertisement for a high quality physical education program than seeing students incorporate the concepts that they're being taught in other real world situations. What you spoke to reminds me of our standards-based social skills that we have. And I'm wondering if we shift gears a little bit to move away from this inclusive culture that you've created by incorporating yoga into your PE classes, and we dig a little bit deeper into standards-based instruction. I'd love to hear about how you approach incorporating yoga into your PE classes and still ensure that there are standards aligned to it and that it's not just like a break or an activity that kids do at the end of class for the last 5 minutes to cool down. And I know that it can be valuable in those contexts, but since you wrote an entire curriculum on it and we're talking about basing entire lessons and a unit on it, I want to make sure that we're able to specifically align standards to the objectives that you have for those lessons. So feel free to share any standard or any example that you would like to share. I'm also wondering if maybe we could both talk about how we incorporate standards-based social skills into yoga lessons as well at some point.
So Gary, the way I approach teaching yoga in a PE setting is come in, play a game, and then settle down on the mats. The academic teachers want the kids to come in and run around and get their energy out. This is what they like to say. And they don't want to come to the gym and be quiet with the lights down and be on the mat and be silent for 45 minutes. So it's a mix. Students need that release during the day, and PE needs to give that to them. Yoga does not equal easy. Students with ADHD sometimes will say to me, oh, I can't do yoga because I have ADHD. And I think the students with ADHD benefit perhaps the most from a good yoga practice because they're always throttling at this higher level. And then after they run around the gym and then they get some mat time, it helps them to kind of settle into their bodies. So in my opinion, the kids with ADHD should be practicing yoga even more, especially the breathing. Yoga aligns nicely with the new Shape America standards, development of a variety of motor skills. So students learn how to practice balancing through yoga. Standard 2, apply knowledge related to movement and fitness concepts. So yoga is a perfect way to teach fitness and the difference between muscular strength and flexibility. Standard 3, develop social skills through movement. I have a great lesson that I like to do with my sixth graders where they pair up with breath buddies. So it's kind of like a clock buddy, and I have a little worksheet for them. So they go around and they find 6 different partners. So then when I call out that breath, so Gary, if you're my buzzing breath and I'm yours, when the teacher calls out buzzing breath, I go and I find you. And then I project up on my screen partner poses. So then you and I try to do, the double down dog. And then when the teacher calls out volcano breath, I find my volcano breath partner. And then the pose is double boat. So my partner and I hold hands and we put our feet in the air and our feet connect and we're holding a double boat. They're developing social skills through movement and they're having fun and they're trying to figure out how to cooperate together and communicate and use those skills. And then standard 4, develop personal skills. Gosh, yoga is just the best for that. Identify personal benefits in movement and choose to engage in physical activity. As we said before, we want our students to be lifelong learners and competent movers. Students can practice yoga anywhere, anytime. There are apps, there are online videos. You can do it in person. You can do it on your own. It's just breathing and moving. It's a great way to teach locomotor skills and balance. Unfortunately, the only time the word yoga is mentioned in the new shape standards is for grades 9 to 12 in standard 4. So this goes back to what we talked about previously. If you want your students to do something that we know is good for them, then we should introduce yoga when they're younger, not just when they're in high school.
I couldn't agree more. One thing that you shared in that response that I wanted to highlight was the accountable talk structure. And maybe it could just be considered like a pairing up structure with the different breaths, and that students have a different partner for each breath. I also think that that's such a great way to efficiently and effectively get students partnered up so that you could potentially ask them questions that would check for their understanding of what they're learning or what they're making progress towards for their daily objective. So students could hear the perspectives of lots of different peers.
Gary, I love that. Where were you when I was putting this book together? I definitely would have added that one in. But yeah, you could. And in fact, maybe I'll do this the next time I'm teaching is say, if you're holding double boat, where are you feeling it? Can you identify the muscles? Are you using muscular strength or are you increasing flexibility?
Yeah, it could be a question directly related to that breath. It also could just be a way to pair students up. So you might want to ask them a question about something else in that lesson, but rather than just have them turn and face their partner, or if they're in rows or whatever, you could call out, a certain breath. Students could have 5 seconds to go find that person. They go pair up, and then you could ask them the question. And if you repeat that 2 or 3 times throughout the lesson, now students were able to answer questions and hear the perspectives of a couple of different students. Let's drill a little deeper into the standard part, and let's see what we can come up with for like a daily objective. I talk often on this podcast about the specific requirement that Denver has around content and language objectives. And I wrote a lot about that in chapter 4 of the book. And I know that it's new to a lot of people. So, I don't ever want to put anybody on the spot, but I love to hear what daily objectives that are aligned to standards sound like in the place where my guests teach, and then see if we could kind of layer on some of the other components that I've gotten so used to by working with the PE teachers in Denver public schools. So let's give it a shot and see what we can come up with for a standards-based daily objective for a yoga lesson. Do you have a standard that you think we could start with?
Yes. So teaching PE is really just like teaching anything else. Once you're a teacher, you're a teacher. We write our objectives on the board just like a math or an ELA teacher would. We do formative assessments. We do summative assessments. We do pre and post because we're always gauging and monitoring student growth and learning. One objective that I love to write on the board, because yoga is just so good for the body physically, is to increase muscular strength and flexibility by holding a variety of yoga poses. And then this really gets into the difference between muscular strength and flexibility. And we also want to teach our students how to take care of their bodies. Where are your quadriceps? Where are your hamstrings? Their antagonistic muscles. What does the word to antagonize mean? And then they'll raise their hand and they'll say, oh, we know that word. We learned about it in ELA. And then we talk about the antagonistic character. So they're cross-referencing the vocabulary that they're learning in a PE class with another subject. And it's just reinforcing what to antagonize means, right? To go against. So it's a great way to explain push and pull muscles.
All right. I love this example. I was a little nervous because I threw a question at you about how you and I could come up with a daily objective based on a standard, but then you go and give a perfect example of something that you already do in class, and it pretty much has the components that I was going to try to layer on top of it. I'll just sharpen it a little bit and you tell me what you think.
Right.
So in this lesson, you want students to understand the differences, maybe even the similarities and differences between muscular strength and muscular flexibility. So what we would require teachers to do here in Denver is to align a language objective with that. And you pretty much wrote it for me by saying that you want them to compare and contrast those two things. So when you communicate this objective to students, we would want students to be able to physically demonstrate both muscular strength and muscular flexibility. And we would make sure, just like you do, that all of the activities and poses and different balances align with muscular strength or muscular flexibility so that students can physically demonstrate them. And then we would also want to think about where in the lesson can we provide students with a couple of opportunities to articulate the differences and the similarities between muscular strength and flexibility. And that would simply be a compare and contrast language objective. How does something like that sound compared to what you expect your students to demonstrate throughout a typical PE lesson?
Well, I think how we assess students is what we're comfortable with, and it depends on the size of the class and, their knowledge and ability. But there's several ways we could do that. It could be a talk and turn with your partner. It could be a list on the board. So sometimes I'll have muscular strength on one side and flexibility on the other, and then they would have to write which pose increases muscular strength, which one increases flexibility. And then sometimes they'll say, well, actually, this one's kind of both. So if you think of a warrior one, one leg forward, bending at the knee, arms go up. So you feel the muscular strength where? Oh, in my quadricep, but I'm getting that stretch in my hip flexors. All right. And when you hold your arms up high, you're increasing the muscular strength in your shoulders, but you're also increasing flexibility. So sometimes it's a little bit of both. But if you continue to be consistent and go around and check for understanding and ask them to demonstrate it, they get it because it's that mind-body connection where we're not just sitting and reading about it or writing about it, we're actually doing it too.
You just shared a great example of how you would incorporate not just a certain level of physical rigor into a class by having students, engage in and practice these different poses and balances, but you also incorporate the cognitive piece as well. That's just so important in a high quality physical education program where students have the opportunity not just to work through a certain set of skills physically, but they're doing things like exactly what you just described, being able to say why a certain pose aligns with muscular strength or why one aligns with flexibility, why some of them have a combination of both. When students walk out of a PE class, they'll be able to answer the question, what did you learn in PE today? And they'll be able to say something to the effect of, well, we learned what muscular strength is and we learned what muscular flexibility is. And I even know a couple similarities and a couple of differences between them. It's so much more powerful than not providing students with those opportunities to articulate their learning, and they just go through various activities or routines where they're working on those skills. Sorry, I probably went on a little bit too long.
No, I liked it. I'm nodding my head. I'm trying not to interrupt.
So you gave a couple of examples in that explanation of how you might assess students. And I love that you incorporated not just physical assessment, but also the cognitive assessment, like I was talking about. Do you have any other examples of what assessment could look like as you incorporate yoga into standards-based PE? How do you measure both student learning and their progress towards physical objectives that you have?
Whenever I hear of assessment, I think of three things. The pre and post, it's great for data collection because as PE teachers, we need to sometimes, unfortunately, let people know what we're doing is important. So a simple pre and post assessment can be thumbs up, thumbs down at the beginning of class, and then again at the end. You can count them up, you could take a picture. But I know myself what my students are walking in with. So that's great for the pre-assessment. Formative assessment. We as PE teachers are always using formative assessments because we see a lot of kids and a lot of kids at once, right? So we need simple things that we can do in a short amount of time. So it could be something like, show me a balancing pose. And they could go into tree, they could go into dancer, they could go into warrior three. Turn and teach your partner joy breath. Then they have all the arms and that's an energizing breath and they're all sniffing. Take a sun salutation at your own pace. This allows me to know who has the sequence down and who can do it and who still needs more guidance. Something else I use is a yoga code of conduct. That could be a daily grade. And I make it worth 10 points, but you could also do 5. And it includes things like mat etiquette. So no shoes on the mat. And are they putting it away properly? So that ties into being responsible and, treating the equipment with care. Being safe, that's self-explanatory. But on a yoga mat, especially in a middle school class, it might look more like keeping your hands and feet to yourself when you're on the mat, right? Can you tell that I teach middle school? Number 3, being mindful, following the directions and not distracting others, actively moving and breathing instead of just were they participating, and then using positive language. So yoga is not a competition. You do your best. Be kind to yourself and to others. Oh, I can't do that. Well, you can't do that pose? Not yet. I use summative assessments when I'm looking to enter grades into the report card. So this is a project of some sort, probably more geared towards middle and high school for those listeners. So it's a way to demonstrate student learning. So you might do something like create a sequence for somebody who's looking to improve posture, right? So then the students would have to decide which poses would stretch the pectorals and which poses would strengthen the upper back and core. And it's really great to see what they come up with.
Those are fantastic examples. So I'll just comb through a couple of them. So for those formative assessments, you had some physical demonstrations, you asking students to show you various poses. So that helps you determine where students are in their physical skill and then maybe adjust your instruction accordingly. You also brought up some of the cognitive assessments that we talked about a little bit earlier by asking students to turn to a partner and teach them a certain pose. They have to think through that and they have to use language in order to articulate that. It goes right back to, in this case, students would probably be describing what the pose looks like. Absolutely, at the middle school level, you could also have students providing some feedback to one another where they're using language like, hey, one thing that you're really great at and or consistent at in this pose is blank. Here's something that you might want to keep in mind for a next step or something to focus on the next time you do the pose. So that really hits back on both the physical level of rigor and then also that cognitive level of rigor. You mentioned in the summative assessment, I think this is just a brilliant assessment, creating a sequence for something like a client who wants to improve their posture. Having students speak like they're a professional in the field, I think is a great way to get students to articulate their learning. Students in that case are going to have to essentially justify why the sequence they came up with is going to be good for this person who wants to improve their posture. So they're going to say, I chose this pose because it does this for my future client who wants to improve their posture.
I do enjoy that project. We teach different types of students, and some kids will love to get up there and act like they're a yoga instructor. And it's really cute because I can hear my words coming through them. So I know that they're really starting to get it. And then there are other students who are a little bit more shy. So they would prefer to draw it, do stick figures and write it. So it's still demonstrating knowledge, whether it is on a piece of paper or if it's getting up in front of the class. One other assessment piece that I like to use, I love rubrics. So assessment in yoga is similar to assessment for any other skill. I like to use rubrics. For example, a breath rubric. A 4 is a role model, so 1 through 4. A role model knows which breath to use and in which situation. Again, teaching our students to breathe properly. And a 1 is doesn't attempt to breathe properly. A 2 and a 3 are they know the different breaths, but sometimes need more prompting. And so the kids can look at the rubric and say, oh yeah, I know the breaths, but I don't always know which breath to use when. And that's a really easy thing to figure out. And then they can answer the question on their own and they can try to I encourage them to try these breaths outside of school. If you're on the free throw line and the game's on the line and you're super nervous, do you want to do joy breath and make yourself more energized? No, you want to calm yourself down. So you want to exhale longer than your inhale. And they'll say, but I don't want to do buzzing breath on the free throw line. I'll look weird. And I said, well, you don't have to let the Z go out, but you could just exhale longer than your inhale.
Those are more great examples of how you could transfer a lot of these skills over into other contexts. I love it. You have been so generous giving teachers advice and strategies on how they can incorporate yoga into their PE classes. What about someone who might still be a little hesitant? Where would you recommend they start? What are some easy entry points for teachers who have little or no yoga experience?
So I started off with little to no yoga experience myself in 2017, and I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing on top of teaching where I am right now. First of all, remember, you don't have to be an expert at everything that you teach. I teach volleyball, I teach flag football, I teach rugby. I never played any of those sports, but I thought those team sports had value to teach, so I learned how to teach it. I went to conferences, I gathered resources. There's a lot of things online. Same thing about yoga. You might be saying, oh, yoga, I don't practice yoga, I don't know anything about it. Well, a lot of the things that we teach, we have to figure out. So number one, go to conferences. I'm starting to see more and more of it. Number two, invite me to work with your district. I've started offering professional development to not only school districts, but to universities too, trying to train the future professionals on how to teach yoga. And honestly, that's why I put these books together. I want to make it easy for PE teachers to implement yoga into the curriculum. We have that knack when we know when to extend an activity, to make it a little bit longer, or to change it. We know how to work with kids and make them feel comfortable. We already have all of these skills. So yoga is really just like teaching any other subject or any other unit that we teach. So if you find that you want to implement it, then make it happen. Use your resources. And remember, you don't have to be an expert. I think about when I first started teaching rugby, I was terrible at it because I didn't know the rules. And then I went to a conference. And then I started, getting better each year. And now I have to say that that's probably one of the best units that I teach, besides yoga, of course. But it's because I worked at it and I worked with my colleagues and I got them to buy into it too.
So just like all the other subjects, you got to put in the time, you got to do some research, you got to connect with resources like yourself, like going to conferences. And at the end of the day, you just got to stay one step ahead of the students that you're teaching, right?
Right. And learn from your mistakes. As I said earlier, I've been teaching a really long time. And if something doesn't go well, it doesn't mean I don't try it again. I try it again. I just try to do it differently.
What's next for you in terms of your work with yoga and physical education? Do you have any upcoming projects? Are you going to be at any conferences? Anything else you'd like to share?
Yes. So there's always something to do with yoga with me, whether it's after school, during my school vacations, or in the summer. I'm going to be working with Bridgewater State University here in Massachusetts. I'm going to work with their future professionals. They invited me to come work with their PE teachers or their student teachers that are going to start teaching PE. So I have that coming up. And then Springfield College invited me back to work with their students again. And I do plan to present at more conferences, but it's just, I sometimes I have to slow myself down because I get so excited about it and I'm so passionate that I just want to do everything, but I'm still teaching full time. And, I have 2 kids and a husband that I need to tend to too, but they've been so great and so supportive. I'm a firm believer in the ripple effect. Hopefully somebody's listening today that wants to try it. And hopefully what I said something that encouraged them or sparked them to do it. And, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm on social media. It's not really my thing, but I'm learning because that's the way of the world. You can follow me on Instagram, Yoga in Phys Ed. I have a website, yogainphysed.com. And my 2 books are available on Amazon. I also provide professional development for PE teachers. I've worked with districts on how to implement yoga into their curriculum. I can do it on Zoom or in person if it's feasible for your schedule and mine.
Kristen, thank you so much for sharing all of your expertise today. You've been very generous with your time. I know that there are teachers out there who are going to experiment with incorporating yoga into their PE classes as a result of everything that you've shared. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you for having me, Gary. This was so much fun. I appreciate it.